Hello and welcome to the Watchdog. My name is Peter Ndorf, standing in for Vuyo Mvoko tonight. Now, South Africans today have been left reeling. This after the power utility Eskom announced an increase in load shedding levels. The country is now on stage 4, and that's rolling blackouts, which will last until Friday, 5 a.m. Well, tonight we zero in on South Africa's energy crisis. The Watchdog begins right now.
Eskom regrets to inform the public that due to the ongoing generation capacity shortages, Stage 4 load shedding will be implemented from 1 o'clock this afternoon until Friday at 5 in the morning. Thereafter, Stage 2 load shedding will continue as previously communicated until 5 a.m. on Saturday. While Eskom regrets the escalation in load shedding, it is necessary to ration the remaining emergency generation reserves, which have been extensively utilized this morning, as we are not getting the reduction in demand as expected from the implementation of Stage 2 load shedding. It was anticipated that an additional 7 units would have returned to service by Monday, and this has not materialized. Further, a generation unit at Arnott Power Station tripped this morning, contributing to the shortages. We remind customers that load shedding is implemented as a last resort to maintain the stability of the power system, regardless of the stage of load shedding. Total breakdowns currently amount to 14,874 megawatts, while planned maintenance is 5,500 megawatts of capacity. Eskom would like to apologize for the inconvenience caused by the implementation of load shedding and requests the public to continue reducing the usage of electricity in order to help us through the constraints. Eskom will communicate promptly should there be any significant changes to the power system.
Earlier, addressing the media in his capacity as ANC president, Cyril Ramaphosa had this to say on the country's electricity crisis.
I spent many hours talking to our people on electricity, and there have been really two factors. They're both external to our people, which is Eskom, and internal to our people, which is the way that electricity has been utilized through illegal connections, the blowing up of transformers and all that. And wherever I've gone, I've said we need to have a conversation about that. Because in some areas, other than the load shedding, which affects everyone, in some areas in Soweto, including where I grew up, that is precisely the problem, apart from load shedding, which has come in a very dramatic way towards the election, is the issue of non-payment, issue of illegal connections, to fund and to fuel another wonderful process that our people have embarked on of being real estate owners. They've built back rooms and all that, and that needs to be fueled with electricity, but the power that is distributed to the various houses is not equal to the number of other structures that have been built. And people have understood that we need to have a conversation, which is what we should be able to have.
All right, so that was the ANC president speaking a little earlier, talking to the media, trying to explain his take on what's happening in terms of the energy crisis in the country. Well, he'll have to wear his other hat as president of the country as this energy crisis continues to unfold. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll start unpacking this energy crisis. Hopefully, a little bit later, we'll be talking to former Eskom CEO Brian Molefe, and we'll also got a panel that's going to help us try and make sense of the pain that we're in right now. today. We're trying to unpack the energy crisis that South Africa is facing. Stage 4 load shedding. That's what we're experiencing at the moment, and this is going to run through till Friday. We had thought that it was going to be over at the weekend. Do you remember? Well, it's sadly taken a turn for the worse, and to help us unpack the country's electricity crisis and look at possible solutions, we're now joined by a panel of energy experts and commentators from the South African Independent Power Producers Association. We're joined by Thomas Garner from the CSIR, the head of energy there, Dr. Clinton Carter-Brown. Clyde Mallinson is an independent energy expert who's director at Virtual Energy and Power. And Transform SA's Adel Nchabaleng joins us now. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
All right, in no particular order, same question for all of you, just kind of to start this conversation off. Let me start with you, Thomas. What do you make of what's going on? Stage 4, we suddenly woke up to this on Monday, today, and we weren't expecting it. Or should we have been?
Yeah, Peter, I mean, we have expected it. And it is simply the fact that you cannot run a power station fleet that is on average older than 39 years, that's been neglected in terms of maintenance over a long period of time. And in a case where you don't have reserve margin. Just to give you some numbers, I mean, typical installed capacity should be around 45 gigawatts at this stage in our country, of which a reserve margin, and NERSA specifies that as between 15 and 19%, should be then 6 to 7 gigawatts, which means that you need to have around 38 gigawatts of capacity to be able to use it as per normal. And at this stage, we've got 5 gigawatts of planned maintenance plant down and around 15 to 17 gigawatts of unplanned maintenance. And that leaves us with around 22 to 24 gigawatts of installed capacity to run the system. And we just don't have the reserve margin. So what's busy happening is we are actually load shedding in a planned way to ensure that we can fill the pump storage dams early in the morning, let's say between 11 at night and 6 in the morning, so that we've got some spare capacity, and then we need to fill the open cycle gas turbines with diesel at the same time, just to keep up. So we're in a position where we just don't have the capacity, right. And because of that, we are load shedding to keep the system safe.
Okay, so an impossible situation, it sounds like. Adel, what do you make of this? We've been having conversations for a long, long time, and it seems to be the same story all the time.
I think, and thank you for the invite. For me, the start is that, well, we've already said this was going to happen. I mean, for many years now, we've been predicting the collapse of the system from an Eskom point of view, on the basis that there hasn't been an increase in terms of building more power stations and ensuring that there is more reliable power capacity, particularly the fact that you have this major aging power plants that are currently ill-maintained, unmaintained in some points, and there has not really been refurbishment of the plants. On top of it, there's been a cut in terms of prioritization of maintenance from a budget point of view, at the workers level, at the executive level, in terms of making sure that there are resources that are given particularly to ensure that Eskom has enough money out of this 200 billion revenue that is receiving, that at least a third of that should have gone particularly to making sure that the power stations are in optimal performing state and are not dependent on the kind of situation whereby we hear now that only 3.5 billion is being given on an annual basis since Andre de Ruyter started. I mean, he moved from a 14 billion at the time of Brian and Kokomolisa at the time to now only 3.5 billion allocation towards ensuring that there is power, there is proper maintenance, there is a budget that is supposed to be given for breakdowns, unscheduled as well as scheduled breakdowns that are happening and ensuring that Eskom runs efficiently. And the issue of coal as well. The coal prices has been going highly up, and that has been affecting Eskom's capacity. On the contrary, Eskom's revenue has been rising on an annual basis from what it used to be at 100 billion at the time to 200 billion, and increasing further in terms of the price hikes that they've been actually demanding. But the service as well as the delivery of the expected energy reliability on the base load level has not been there. There's been major commitments given towards procurement on renewable energy to offset the current program which they actually agreed on, which was Mudipu and Kusile power build. But at the same time, there's been a major neglect on key fundamentals. You know, your bread and butter issues of power plant maintenance and ensuring that, you know, power plant generators are working, as well as the whole system itself in its totality. It's in optimal function. So there's been a major neglect on that side of it. And then there's nobody to blame in this case except the current arrogant, really, you know, very aloof CEO of the entity, which is Andre de Ruyter. You know, his team, I believe, are not getting along with him at the state because some of the people have been demanding that maintenance be prioritized. And he's made the promise initially when he started, but he hasn't been able to keep up to that promise and has reneged on some of the commitments that they are going to prioritize the maintenance program of Eskom.
All right, we will discuss that a bit more because it sounds like you're describing an absolute emperor who doesn't answer to a board or doesn't have a management team with expertise that he listens to, but we'll explore that a bit more. Clyde, what are your thoughts on what's playing out?
It's pretty much exactly as predicted. So we've been seeing for a very long time now that the availability factor of the coal fleet in particular has been declining. And the way I like to look at it is that we need to be building spare capacity to allow us to shut down the coal fleet as it comes due to retirement. And instead, we're waiting for elements of the coal fleet to retire or to break, and then we're scrambling to replace that capacity. So if you live in an old house and the pipes are leaking and the roof is leaking, you want to move to a new house, you have to build the new house before you can vacate and demolish the old house. And our problem is that we have a disconnect between the department that is building the new energy system and what it's allocating towards that, and Eskom, who is trying to keep us working and running with the old system, which is no longer fit for purpose. And that's our basic problem. So we had a 6-year gap in procurement of new energy. So for 6 years, we didn't do anything. And now we're finding it as expected. The old fleet is we've lost our trust in it, basically, in the old fleet. We're fortunate, in my opinion, to have the caliber of leadership we currently have. I shudder to think what would happen if we didn't have the caliber of leadership and the caliber of people in Eskom working hard to keep this old fleet running. And we actually need to rally as a country around that Eskom artisanal lab.
Okay, that's Clyde. He's frozen for a couple of minutes, but let's go to Clinton, I think. I hope he's on the line. Clinton, what are your thoughts just as an opening kind of gambit?
Yeah, thanks and good evening. I think Clyde has really described the situation well. This is something that I think the country has seen for several years. It's very unfortunate that it's with us now. We could have long debates and discussions in terms of how we got here, but I think it's very, very clear that we need a step change, that despite the best intentions, even if we do start to get on top of the maintenance of the coal fleet, which we need to, that in itself is not going to be sufficient. In addition to not only the performance challenges around availability, we also have quite deep and systemic non-conformance in terms of environmental emissions. And many of those plants are now very, very rapidly reached end of life, and they need to be retired. They need to be decommissioned. I think within this context, what we start to see in terms of COP and the finance deal that's come out, I think really through the leadership in particular of the new Eskom executive, trying to steer a new course for the country, that would see the accelerated decommissioning of that coal fleet, and it's going to replace it with a new energy system gradually over time. This is not something that will happen overnight. This is a 10, 20-year journey to actually decommission the coal completely and transition. So in the immediate, we have a lot of opportunity in terms of the rapid procurement of alternative energy, in particular renewable energy with energy storage systems. Many customers, Cloud himself, it's just been load shed and for sure has his own battery system. We're going to see a lot of that kind of deployment, a lot of technologies that various businesses, communities, industries will be deploying on scale. And we need to do that with Eskom because there's no silver bullet here. This is not Eskom's challenge alone, it's the country's challenge. Eskom, no doubt, through the CEO, will rally its troops and take the necessary action to ensure that we can get on top of the maintenance, because it's very, very clear that some very deliberate and deep ownership and delivery in terms of maintenance is required by Eskom. But in addition to that, there's many other things that we need to be doing in parallel. And I think it's the time to really get cracking with that. Thank you.
Clinton, thanks very much indeed for your opening thoughts. Gentlemen, in fact, thank you for your opening thoughts. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to hear for a short while from the former CEO of Eskom, Brian Molefe, what his take is on the situation that Eskom finds itself in. This is somebody who was in the hot seat, so he probably knows better than anybody else what Andre de Ruyter is going through right now. All of that still to come. Stay with us. You're watching The Watchdog. Right, welcome back. You're watching The Watchdog, and today we're focusing on the energy crisis that's gripped the country, and we're in stage 4 load shedding, which means about 6 hours of rolling blackouts every day until Friday. Well, South Africa's power utility Eskom is failing to keep those lights on, and we're now joined by somebody who was CEO of this power utility, Brian Molefe. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Your thoughts about the current energy crisis that South Africa is finding itself in?
Well, I think that we need to look at what Eskom has been saying in the last couple of days about what they say the problem is. I think on Friday or Saturday, they said that there was a problem in Zambia. Now, they never explained exactly what the problem in Zambia is. And as a result of that, there was a stage 2 load shedding, and they linked it to Kahora Basa. And I actually don't know what Kahora Basa has to do with Zambia, because Kahora Basa is a secure line to South Africa that does not go via Zambia. And they also blamed the Southern African Energy Pool agreement for load shedding over the weekend. Move to Monday morning, where we moved to stage 4. Eskom says that there were 7 units that were supposed to come back last night or this morning. And those units did not come back. And so because the units did not come back, we are moving to stage 4 load shedding until Friday. So what that tells me is that the units that were supposed to come back on Sunday night or on Monday morning will not be coming back until Friday. So how did management arrive at a conclusion that it was possible for the units to have come back yesterday morning? And if the units did not come back yesterday morning, I would have expected them to say, well, at least 3 of them came back, or at least 2 of them came back, or at least 1 of them came back. And we're expecting another one tomorrow and another one day after tomorrow and so on. It looks like all 7 won't be available until Friday. And on top of that, we had another unit going off, which tells me that if one mistake happens between now and Friday, we are possibly going to stage 6 load shedding between now and Friday. It's possible if we lose another unit. The fundamental problem at Eskom is that the energy availability factor is at 61%. You need the energy availability factor to go to 75% to stop load shedding. And it does not look like management has a plan to take the EAF to 75%. I must say that during my time at Eskom, we were able to push the energy availability factor to 81% with the same fleet. I must disagree with Clyde and Clinton that the management of Eskom know what they are doing. I don't think they do. If they are not deliberately not fixing what is broken, they are just grossly incompetent. Because if you look at the units that are failing and the units that are returning to the system, the level of the unplanned maintenance at 15,000 units is just gross incompetence. People are not doing what they were supposed to do, and management is not able to rein people in. I was there, I know it. There's nothing wrong with the current fleet. The current fleet just needs to be treated in terms of the operating manuals that are there. That is what we did. We went back to the basics. We went back to getting the operating manuals of each and every unit in each and every power station and said to the managers, operate it according to this manual. The moment you deviate, especially that the fleet is old, the moment you deviate from the operating manuals, you are going to have load shedding. There's no point in saying that load shedding is going to be resolved by new generation capacity. That takes time. We are talking about energy for this week. We are talking about the impact on the economy during this week, not in 2 years' time, not in 3 years' time. So I think that the management really needs to up their game or really admit that they have been grossly incompetent.
Are you suggesting that they're not being honest with the public in terms of what the problems are?
Well, Peter, they said something happened in Zambia. Do you know what happened in Zambia? Does anybody know what actually happened in Zambia? Because that was just a statement inside their public statement. Nobody, not even the media, asked them. So what is it that happened in Zambia? When they said this morning 7 units did not return, but they were expected to return, when management expects 7 units to return, and they don't return, and nobody asks, why did the units not return? And so when are those units returning? What we hear is there will be stage 4 load shedding until Friday, which means that those units are off until Friday. The units that was something that was supposed to happen on Monday morning will not be happening until Friday. And that is 7 units. And I don't believe that they will all return at the same time on Friday. I mean, they should be telling us that 1 unit returned or 2 units returned or none of them returned, but they will be returning on Tuesday, another one on Wednesday, another one, and so on and so forth. But they are saying stage 4 load shedding until at a precise time at 5 o'clock on Friday.
One of my panelists earlier on said that...
That sounds very good.
Yeah, one of my panelists earlier on said that if it wasn't for the current management, that things would be worse. I mean, the fleet is a few years older than when you were CEO. Could that be a factor?
No, the fleet is over 30 years old. So the 3 years that I was away does not make a difference. It's the same fleet. So the fleet is not... has not become much older since I left. It's exactly the same fleet, exactly the same problems, which are tube leaks. And the fleet ran since I left for a couple of years before it started load shedding again because of management incompetence.
But the energy demands have increased, though.
Not dramatically over the last 3 years, no. No, the energy, I mean, that is what was being said even when I was there. The energy demands have increased, increased. The energy demand has not increased. We have demand of about 32,000 megawatts at West on a day, intraday. Our capacity is about 56,000 installed capacity. It's not the energy that is not in demand. It's not the demand that has increased. It's the energy availability factor that has decreased from 81% when I left to 61% today, and getting worse. I'm sorry, Peter, we can't sugarcoat this. It is management incompetence and a minister that is not prepared to face the problem in the eye, who is blaming state capture for today's load shedding. It's ridiculous.
If you were reappointed CEO, what would be the first thing that you would do?
Well, we will see if that happens.
All right.
I don't know. I would make attempts to increase the energy availability factor, and I will tell the nation exactly what is being done to increase the energy availability factor. There is one unit. There is one power station that is currently at 24% capacity. There's no extraordinary intervention to increase that unit's capacity to above 50%, which will deal with the majority of load shedding. So I don't think that the management is committed enough, or if they are just simply incompetent.
Are you suggesting that with different management would never have gotten to stage 4?
No, I can't say with different management we would never have gotten to stage 4. It depends on what the management would have done. I think with different actions, even by the same management, with a different response to the crisis, we would never have gotten to stage 4. I mean, to be told that there was a problem in Zambia. Peter, has the SABC asked Eskom, what was the problem in Zambia? What was exactly the problem in Zambia that caused stage 2 load shedding? That links to Kahora Basa. If you know, Peter, Kahora Basa and Zambia have got nothing to do with each other. Kahora Basa is a dedicated line to South Africa. It could never be affected by a situation in Zambia. Why are we being told that? And why is the media, why is anybody not asking of the management? Why is the minister not asking? So exactly what happened in Zambia?
The team,
it's either deliberate.
The team below management, the team below management, are you satisfied that the skills are still there and it really is just about decisions being made?
The team below management is the responsibility of the CEO. We can't, like Mr. Gordon, begin to say he doesn't run plants. He must cause plants to be ran. That is what the CEO gets paid for. He must cause things to happen. And if they're not happening, must take responsibility. We cannot jump to the team below management. Why? Why do we do that? Why do we go to the guys below management? Management must put pressure on those guys. And if they don't, then they must take the blame.
All right. Mr. Malifa, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us about the current crisis in the country. Thank you for your time. All right. That's Brian Malifa, former CEO of Eskom, pointing directly at the management team under Andre de Ruyter there for the failings of Eskom at this time. He says that a lot of what's happening is about actions and decisions taken, and the current management seems to be making the wrong ones, saying that they need to up their game a little bit more, and also concerned about the stories that we're being told as the reasons behind the power outages that we have. And he even hinted that if there's another mistake during the course of the next 4 or 5 days, we could find ourselves at stage 6. So that's Brian Malifa. We're talking to him now. But let's go back to our panel and just get some response, I guess, to what we've heard. Let me start with you, Clyde, because you felt that the current team, if it wasn't there, things would be worse. Brian Malifa seems to think the complete opposite. All right, unmute.
Yeah, I didn't really. Sorry, I didn't want to get into a slanging match or whatever with Mr. Malefi. I think the Zambian thing is just a red herring, because the fact is that we did lose a certain amount of power from Cahora Bassa. And remember, a grid system is interlinked, so something that happens on one point on a grid can influence what happens elsewhere on the grid. So I don't know the details, but I think that was restored within about 2 hours, and we probably got 750 megawatts from Cahora Bassa instead of 1,500. So it's neither here nor there. And I don't think Eskom was saying, you know, the situation we find ourselves in is a very serious one. But looking at that one statement about something that happened in Zambia, and that is not really relevant. I have some ideas as to what happened. One of the things that happened about 6 years ago at Eskom is they stalled the building of the new capacity. In the analogy I used, the new houses that we needed to move into when the old houses needed to be shut down. That was stalled for 6 years. If that hadn't have been stalled, we would have had 6 or 7 or 8,000 megawatts of additional capacity on the grid as we sit here today, and we probably wouldn't be having load shedding, but we would be quietly retiring some of the coal fleet that actually is over 60 years old. The average fleet is 37 or 38 years old, but some of the old members are 60 years old, and if you've tried to get spare parts for a 60-year-old car, good luck to you. So I think we had a hiatus on new build for as many as 6 years, and that's one of the big reasons we're having problems at the moment.
Clinton, is this something that we just need to get used to, that this is going to be the story of our life for a good number of years still to come?
No, firmly not. I think the moment we become and we accept load shedding as the norm, we are really doing ourselves in a country and as a continent a severe injustice. I believe that the Eskom leadership is taking this very seriously, and that we as a country need to do a lot more. And I think the good news is that whilst it's not going to be something that can necessarily be solved quickly, it can definitely be solved. And in the process of solving it, we can not only restore our supply-demand gap and get back to a level of resilience and stability in the electrical power system, but ultimately, in the longer run, we can ensure that South African electricity is cheaper, sustainable, and it's going to fuel new green economy jobs and growth, including new opportunities for Sasol-type industries based on our clean, renewable electricity in Africa. So there's a long-term play here and a long-term opportunity, but it requires deep leadership across the business community, across the private sector, to actually get the projects rolling that is going to close the gap. And I think we've seen some elements of that with the latest announcements of the bid window 6 reprocess. I mean, that's the process that Clyde was talking to, that was stalled by Mr. Molefe when he was leader of Eskom as CEO. And in fact, he and the Eskom board refused to sign those PPA agreements. And had we proceeded with the procurement of that renewable energy, not to say that all of our problems would be solved today, but we would be definitely in a better off position. So I think we all need to reflect on the different roles and that the key role of leadership plays in terms of addressing this. So no, we must not become complacent with it. We're going to need to do a lot more, and we need to do it very, very quickly. I think the good news here is that the private sector is poised to play an increasing role. There are lots of project development. I mean, we saw 10 gigawatts of projects bid in the bid window 5. We're procuring, 2.7 gigawatts of that. So there is a lot of developed projects. Many of them are still in areas with some grid capacity. And I believe that we could get a lot of that capacity onto the grid quicker. But even those processes are going to take us 2 to 3 years to get that capacity online. So between now and then, we need a lot of other solutions, which includes Eskom getting on top of the maintenance of the coal fleet, and an urgent attention is required. I'm not hearing the CEO of Eskom say that they've done everything and they've done it all well. I think Eskom is taking deep ownership in terms of saying everything is not as it should be. I would personally, as a citizen of South Africa, be very worried. The CEO is saying we've done everything, and we don't have to pull out. Yeah, I'm hearing Eskom say there are deep challenges. We need to find solutions. We've let the country down, and we.
All right. Adel, let me come to you just before we start looking at solutions and a way forward. What I'm hearing is that we've probably, over decades, actually been making poor decisions, not timeous decisions, perhaps sometimes not even foreseeing the future that was coming at us at a pace. Do you think we have the capacity in terms of leadership to do the right things going forward, and also maybe even the political will, because government is the shareholder?
I mean, the question to ask is, what are the right things now? I mean, the right things, we have already indicated that power plants in terms of maintenance should have been prioritized. If even that one right action has not even been performed, what are we talking about? I mean, new builds are things that takes time and are only going to come into the system. As I already indicated, we've got 7,000 megawatts of new build renewable energy currently in the pipeline. Why is that 7,000 not kicking in and actually offsetting the load shedding stage 4, which is 4,000 megawatts? So some of these things that we get told are not quite the truth, and we actually misled in many ways. The new capacity that we're talking about when people are referring to IPPs is mainly relating to renewable energy, and renewable energy has limitations. So even if the decisions are made to procure fast and quicker and ensure that you have renewable energy in the grid, the current South African grid is still stitched and actually built around what we call base load, major high voltage power lines, major cities that are actually dependent on electricity on that high voltage line that comes in and then actually gets dropped down to levels whereby municipalities can start distributing that power and energy. So the fundamentals are not right. The understanding to what needs to be done is not correct as well. And there's a lot of lying in between. There is a huge amount of procurement that has already happened. And this amount of procurement is already costing Eskom, as we're talking, around 25 billion on an annual basis. That is just direct cost to pay for the megawatts that are produced in terms of hours, that are produced out of the new power bills that are not even feeding into the current grid and are not even providing the energy that is required. Not only that, we have aging power plants that by nature of a power plant, when it ages, you do refurbishment, you renew it, you do part swapping, you do component replacement, you do building up of these things. That capacity is already there, exists, and has existed for generations. That's what the Afrikaner economy at the time of apartheid depended on. They created their own independence and created a machinery by which it was self-maintaining, using local components, using technology, buying instruments as well as technology at some level, software and other things internationally. But locally, most of the things were made. You had technicians, you had capable engineers, you had people who would be able to maintain these power stations. And components were made locally. How come when black government came into power, suddenly all of that capacity was replaced and removed and quietly shut out, and made sure that we depend on international engineering companies, we depend on international consultants, we depend on international, all sorts of insights coming from knowledge bases that was never there in the apartheid days. But when the black government comes in, and this is quite political and people don't understand it, that you undermine a black regime in its power. The reason why the ANC is failing on a dismal level is they relied a lot on listening to these unnecessary experts when they should have just turned back to the people who build this capacity, the current people who are still alive, people who were running Eskom power plants, the black engineers, the white engineers, the colored and Indian engineers that were part of the particular manpower that was behind Eskom. Nobody turned to them. You had capable CEOs. I mean, Brian just came in and explained that it's an issue of leadership, that they took a decision to actually up the energy availability factor and pushed it to a level by which it was within international standards, 81% in terms of energy availability factor. How come the current CEO with all of the stuff, with the compliment, with all the beautiful things we've heard about his capability to turn around the institution, which he has done none of it. He has just actually dropped it. Has not even been able to do that. It comes down to an issue of leadership. And in this case, the leadership that we've relied upon has been actually the worst leadership in guiding this particular challenge that we're faced with. Energy is a lifeline. It affects lives. It affects incomes. It affects communities. It affects development. It affects the ability of a GDP to be created. Do you know that Eskom over the last 10 years has been paying people off, major companies, to get off its grid and reduce their demand in terms of electricity utilization? They've been paying off industries to shut down and move overseas and to ensure that South Africa is deindustrialized. So any person who's not using their right logical mind would assume that this situation is just only purely about incompetence. It's not about incompetence only. It is far deeper, because your show is about the watchdog.
Yeah.
Go deeper into the fundamentals and ask why. It is necessary for a black government to fail. And in this case, fail on the basis that it is given wrong advice. It is been made to rely on experts that are not even capable of doing what needs to be done. Keeping the lights on, it's a very simple process. It was done during apartheid in the worst of times. Now, in the times where it's supposed to be the best of times, it is impossible to keep that happening.
So local solutions for local problems is what I'm hearing you saying. Thomas, I want us to shift the conversation a little bit as we start to look forward. I'm hearing a bit of optimism. As independent power producers, a lot of things have been happening. Legislation has switched a little bit, and a lot of activity in terms of independent producers coming into the game. Are you optimistic that enough is being done to empower IPOs, independent power producers, and quickly enough?
Question of a very long and difficult answer, and I don't think enough has been done. We're sitting where we are sitting because of a lot of challenges in this very complex environment that the deal and Brian has been talking about, as well as Clinton and Clyde. So there's no one answer to this. The challenge that we've got is simply we've got this older than, on average, 39-year-old coal-fired power stations that is not really serviceable anymore. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and we can now start blaming certain individuals and certain leaders at certain times. We've seen the hollowing out of the state-owned enterprises in the 10 last years of state capture, and that has led to what we see now. So Mr. Molefe was also leading Eskom in that time, and if you listen to the Zondo Commission and to everything else, there's a lot of challenges. I don't want to make a call around that. All I can say is at this stage, Eskom is struggling with competence and with skills, and that's because of the hollowing out. People don't want to work there anymore. People are leaving in droves, and the competent people has left. Some of them are working overseas. Some of them are retired in Hermanus. But we've got a challenge on the skills on the competency side. So if you look at solutions, and that's where we need to go to, because we need to stop the blame game. We need to bring new megawatts onto the bars as soon as possible. We've seen the IRP 2019 being promulgated in November of 2019 by the cabinet. It's now November 2021. It's 2 years later. We know there was COVID in between. And the challenge is there's no procurement being done since November 2019. I mean, Window 5 has now been bid, but it's not been procured yet because it still needs to reach financial close, and that will take another 6 months. And then you need to build a plant, which will take another 18 months to 2 years. So government has been dragging its feet, not only in the last 2 years since November 2019, but since 2014, 2015, when Mr. Molefe and the Eskom board didn't want to sign the PPAs. And what we see now is simply, and Clyde has modeled it very, very eloquently, is that if we have additional energy on the bars, we can actually pump the pump storage up at the right time of day so that we have the reserve margin when it's needed. We don't have to load shed to create reserve margin when we need it. And that's it's a very simple answer to a very complex issue, is we just don't have enough capacity on the bars.
Okay, I'm going to start wrapping up this conversation, and I want to hear from the last three of my panelists as well, because Thomas started the whole solutions question. To the three of you that are left, I've just appointed you to the board at Eskom. I'm the minister, and I want one quick solution, one quick fix that you think could be a game changer for us going forward. Let's start with you, Clinton.
I would continue the deep acceleration of the unbundling of Eskom, the creation of the independent system operator, very quickly and urgently create a transparent electricity market that allows the system operator to procure, not just from the Eskom power generation fleet, but a host of other project developers that they could develop capacity and get into the market without having to follow a government-led procurement process. So I would very quickly deregulate the industry and get a market structure in place that is going to drive the private sector to come to the party to get capacity on the grid quickly, and do that in a way that is transparent and is going to also drive longer-term decarbonization and cost reduction in the electricity sector. Those things are not mutually exclusive, and that's what I would do.
All right, fantastic. Clyde, in less than a minute, what's your low-hanging fruit that we could do very quickly?
Okay, if I had the position to do this, I would use every part of my being to convey to the South African public and all of the people in South Africa that we've actually got an emergency at the moment. This is not a fire drill, we've actually got a fire. And we need to rally around rebuilding our electricity capacity as if it were an emergency. So we need to treat it in the same way we treated the COVID emergency. Yeah. So in that emergency, we vaccinated people and we used vaccines that weren't necessarily locally manufactured. We're in such a spot of bother at the moment that we need to bring in equipment and teams from potentially all over the world to help us out. We need to get the message across that this is serious. It's no longer a game time or a pretend fire drill.
All right. Thank you so much indeed for that, Clyde. Adel, final word from you. You're sitting on the board. I'm the chairman. I've just asked you for help. What can you tell me in less than a minute?
In less than a minute, the 2/3, 1/3 model would always work. We've written the IRP around the 2/3 baseload power capacity, which means bring back all the power plants and refurbish them and ensure that they are working optimally and they're achieving above 80. You know, if you hit 90, that would be an amazing feat in terms of energy availability factor. Bring them back. Stop shutting down power plants. Ensure that there is capacity to repair, maintain. Ensure that your coal pricing is negotiated properly. Ensure that all your contracts with regards to suppliers are brought into line and ensure that they are actually aligned with market demand right now and market supply and demand. Those are the 2/3 where currently you need coal fleet, you need a nuclear fleet in South Africa, which means ensure the prioritization of building brand new nuclear fleet, which will last you to the next 100 years from today. If you build them in the next 10 years, we'll have a fleet available. That should be a priority. Then on top of it, ensure that you bring in the alternative energy as well as renewable green energy that is required. One on coal, bring in clean coal, bring in renewable coal, which you can actually make clean coal through the process we call HEL, a high efficiency, low emissions process, by making coal now clean in its sense. And on top of it, bring in a combination of renewables to ensure that you offset the current grid burden with its residential as well as semi-industrial and minor industrial. Bring in renewable energy and solutions, bring in storage in a small level because it's expensive to have storage capacity. If I was on that board, I would say your immediate is to ensure that load shedding is a history. You do away with it by ensuring that you bring in your energy availability factor, you bring your power stations into operation, and you ensure that you actually prioritize properly for maintenance.
Thank you so much indeed, gentlemen. Thomas Garner, Adel Chabaleng, Clyde Mallinson and Clinton Carter-Brown. Thank you so much indeed for your contributions, and your director's fees are on the way. All right, we still have Brian Malife to hear from. He heard his name mentioned a couple of times, and he'd just like to close the program with some response. Brian, thanks very much for coming back. What would you like to say from what you heard?
No, I just want to say that those gentlemen that are on your show, Peter, know that wind and solar will not resolve load shedding. And wind and solar are not part of the resolution to the current load shedding. Today, the whole of Gauteng was overcast, which means solar was not available. Even when solar is available, the energy availability factor of solar is about 20%. Or 20 to 25%, similar with wind. So they don't work, Peter. Until we can resolve the problem of the storage of wind and solar, they don't work. I don't know why they're leading us down a rabbit hole that is not going to resolve the current load shedding problem. The current load shedding problem, and I see that they ran away from the issue of proper maintenance of the fleet this week. They ran away from the fact that 7 units were supposed to return and they didn't return. And there's nobody who's taking accountability, and they're not holding Eskom to account. The issue of Zambia had nothing to do with Kawara Basa. I mean, even the gentleman that was ridiculing me and saying that it was a fact that there was a problem in Kawara Basa. But can somebody tell us what exactly happened in Zambia? Eskom can't just say there was a problem in Zambia and then all of us, the whole country, except Eskom, statement that there was a problem in Zambia without questioning exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. I think part of the problem is us. We are not holding Eskom management to account. We are not holding the Ministry of Public Enterprises to account for the problems that we are experiencing of load shedding. At the moment, this week, what are we going to do to make sure that we go back to stage zero on Friday?
All right. Brian Malife, thank you so much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us on the program. And that's how we come to the end of tonight's program, The Watchdog. Vuyamvoka will be back with you tomorrow, but thanks for tuning in, and so sorry that we couldn't get to your messages, but as you heard, so much needed to be expressed, and let's just hope that we find a solution and find it quickly. Good night.